Okay, welcome back to another edition of Rotten Reviews. Today I'm going to take a look at some rotten reviews of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, a Nicolas Cage movie from 2010. On the tomato meter, we have 40%. The audience score sits at 53%. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to state I disagree with this. In my opinion, The Sorcerer's Apprentice is worthy of a 3-star review rating. I actually just saw this rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and my first reaction was WTF, because I recall when this film came out, I saw it while it was in the theater, or should I say, I saw it right after it released, after it finished its theater run. And I had no problem with it. In fact, I probably saw it 3 times on home video. Everybody I knew, even the employees where I worked at the time, enjoyed this movie. I never heard anybody in the real world badmouth this movie or have a complaint on it. I'm being completely honest. Now I come to Rotten Tomatoes and I see that it has, I discount the critics score, right? But I see that it has an audience score of 53%. And I'm wondering what has changed or what has happened since its release date that it sits so low in people's opinions, or at least in people that are motivated to write an opinion. And I'm at a complete loss. So I'm going to go through and look at Rotten reviews on this movie. Just so I can try to figure out where people are coming from, because I don't agree. 2.5 stars. It kills time. That's about it. Cage is really good at playing roles where he looks like a hobo that just climbed out of a trash can. Okay, so a Nicolas Cage hater, so to speak. I don't know what to say to that because that's not a review of the movie, so I'm going to move on. 4 stars. Why do we need a remake of The Sword and the Stone when we have this underrated 2010 fantasy flick? Okay, I wouldn't compare this to The Sword and the Stone. I would compare this to Disney's Fantasia, because that's what Walt Disney was trying to do with this movie, is make it a version of a live-action Fantasia. They even had quite a large scene in this movie that recreated the classic broomstick scene in Fantasia. It was deliberate. That's what they attempted to do with this movie. I think they did it well in that they got adults and kids to watch this. This was a family movie, a typical what you would consider a family movie from Walt Disney. It wasn't trying to be a dark superhero movie. It wasn't trying to be Harry Potter. It was trying to recapture the magic of Disney's Fantasia, and that's what it did. I thought it succeeded. Let's move on. 3.5 stars. Nick Cage is so cool. It is rare to find a film with as good of magic conceptually and effects-wise as Harry Potter. The magical references are great throughout. The relationship built up by our main character and love interest is pretty cheesy but still romantic. As a character, Becky actually plays a pretty meaningful role in the movie. As a whole, the movie is definitely driven by the characters as well as the amazing effects and cool concepts. The villains are not the best or deep, but they do. Okay, well, I would generally agree. The characters do drive the story. Things don't just randomly happen to them. And right from the beginning of the movie, there is a story presented to you that starts everything off, and the story continues along, and it concludes everything that it began at the beginning. So I don't have a problem with this. I don't see why this would be considered flawed. I consider it not a flawed story. I can't fault Nicolas Cage as an actor in this. Yeah, he's got his reputation. I've mentioned this before. It doesn't come across wrong in this movie. The secondary character, or, well, I don't know if you call him a secondary character, but his apprentice, so to speak, he comes across fine. He seems well cast in this movie, probably perfectly cast for his role in this movie. It is a family-friendly movie. It's not supposed to be super dark. It's not supposed to be too funny, and it's not. Again, I see comparisons in the reviews to Harry Potter. I don't think that's fair at all. It's not supposed to be a Harry Potter tale. Just because it has magic doesn't mean it should be compared to Harry Potter. It makes no sense to me. But let's move on. 3 stars, 8.5, Spanish. 3 stars, a pretty good first film. in what could be a series, I want to either go back in time or fast forward. I largely agree. The beginning parts of the movie that were set up in the past, they are pretty intriguing. They're done right. I wouldn't have mind to see more of that. It left you with just enough to keep you hooked, and I think that was the intention. They didn't want to stay in the past for too long. They just wanted you to get the vibe from it and then pull you forward, and I think it worked really well. They didn't overplay their hand on the historical parts or the fantasy historical parts. 1 star. Boring Nicolas Cage plays generic magic guy in a bland young adult fantasy. Also, there's a brief scene that resembles a segment from Fantasia if you squint. I disagree. I think this is somebody that would also just pan it because it's might be young adult to them. I'll agree that stuff that's young adult, like say Twilight, and even some of the Harry Potter stuff, you know, the last few chapters in that, yeah, that rubs me the wrong way too. It's almost young adult done in a bad way. This doesn't come across to me as young adult. It comes across to me as a generic family fantasy movie where the bad guys aren't too bad and the good guys aren't too good. Um, you know, young adult, I don't see that. I don't consider that a valid criticism. 2.5 stars. Great visuals and acting, boring plot, and uninteresting characters. I disagree. Well, I agree. The visuals are good. The acting's good. Boring plot and uninteresting characters. No, actually, I found them completely interesting. It's just maybe a family-friendly movie isn't for you. 1.5 stars. Pretty much garbage. Not only were the settings generally boring, it was also very lacking in creativity and might only be suitable for young children. It felt like they were trying to make it cool and even a little bit realistic, but it's honestly one of the worst movies out there. Nothing made proper sense, and what annoyed me the most were honestly their pathetic attempts at magic. Not only is the action depressingly lacking, it's also written like turn-based combat where you finish your shot, then I can do mine. Well, maybe it's a little bit turn-based combat because that's the way Fantasia comes across. That's the way magic in family-friendly movies comes across. I didn't get that. Maybe a hair. I mean, if I had to think back, a hair of it could be like that. But no, it didn't strike me like that, and I've seen it 2 or 3 times. I just saw it as, you know, this isn't a dark comedy. 5 stars. Look, I get it. You are all Nicolas Cage haters, but all around this movie was awesome. Okay, a few cheesy parts, but this is one of these movies my family watches over and over. Way underrated. I don't agree on 5 stars. I think 3, but I agree otherwise with this reviewer. There are a lot of Nicolas Cage haters. There's nothing wrong with this film. Everybody I know in the real world, kids or not, enjoyed this film. The ones that told me what their kids thought, the kids all loved it. So I think it's a success for what it was trying to do. It's not Harry Potter, by the way. 2.5 stars. The Sorcerer's Apprentice comes off as forgettable. It is a boring movie. No, totally disagree. I can still remember more about this movie than I can remember about the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, or whatever chapters of Harry Potter. I find those a lot more boring than this movie and a lot less original. 3 stars. Enjoyable. Nick Cage is as fun as ever and remarkably restrained, and the magic is nicely realized. Yeah, Nick Cage is remarkably restrained. The parts where he's not, it's not too much. It works for the character. You know, unlike a lot of his other movies, there's nothing really to make fun of with his performance here. 1 star. Painful to sit through. No, I disagree. 5 stars. Simply put, fast-paced, plenty of action, loads of well-done CGI. I found it highly entertaining and worth recommending this to others. Also a film the whole family can watch. I mostly agree with that. The pacing was fine. It moved quick. There were some love scene elements. Again, they were unique enough where it didn't seem that time was dragging. I agree. This movie moved from front to back just fine. The CGI was fine. There was nothing off-putting about it. It wasn't overdone. It wasn't too cartoony. I mostly agree. I just wouldn't give it 5 stars because, you know, 5 stars I'm reserving for something that also might have been PG-13 and it would have had a little more serious drama. It would have had more backstory. It would have had a bit bigger budget. Otherwise, I'd say this is a solid 3 stars. 2 stars. The Sorcerer's Apprentice is full of familiar and cliched elements that have been seen many times before. Again, a lot of Disney movies are like that. Certainly Fantasia was like that, the cartoon. Walt Disney movies, the original Walt Disney stories, almost every one of them's cliched now because everybody's tried to rip them off and do the same thing over and over and over. So I disagree. 5 stars. It's a rare treat to have a family film with great acting and action and a great storyline. We found the movie very entertaining. I wish there was a sequel to look forward to. I mostly agree. I wouldn't mind a sequel. I think it's too late now. But if there had been a sequel like a year and a half, 2 years after this one, I think it would have worked just fine. Even with a bigger budget, it would have been better. But we didn't get it, and it's way too late, so let's not go there now. 4 stars. The action and CG is good enough to watch, but the plot is not super exciting. There is nothing new about the story. Again, it's not supposed to be new. This is Walt Disney telling the same story they've had in their collection for a long time. They're just trying to spin it out into the real world in a little bit different of a way. Of course, it's not unique. 3.5 stars. Fun movie, but why in the modern day? I disagree. I think, maybe this reviewer is trying to compare it to Harry Potter. Again, I find Harry Potter the subject of, I could do rotten reviews on Harry Potter because to me that's quite stale, and it was stale after the second one. But let's move on. 5 stars. I loved it. It was great. 4 stars, a fantastic movie with some great and some okay performances. Nick Cage is awesome as a wizard, and the magic is interesting, and action sequences are entertaining. I mostly agree. Wouldn't say Nick Cage is awesome as a wizard, but I'd say he's completely serviceable as a wizard. 3 stars. Nicolas Cage gives one of his most restrained performances in his career. I'll agree with that. 5 stars. Just wow. I almost crashed my new Lexus driving home from the theater on opening night trying to post this review. I'm not sure why exactly Nicolas Cage isn't in the middle for the movie poster, and instead that gay kangaroo is there. But besides that, I was changed by this movie. I had to tell my youth group at the rec center to see this movie after doing their Hail Marys this Friday. The layout of all the sorcerers, the clear references to feminism. Okay, it's a little, the comedy wasn't bad on this review. Coming from 2016, 7 years after the movie was released, so I'll give you that. 5 stars. I have watched this many times. It's great for turning off your brain and just enjoying it. Wanting the nerd to get the girl and come into himself. My nieces and nephews love coming over to see it on my big TV with extra buttered popcorn. I'll agree with that. Yeah, that's been my experience. Everybody, all the kids loved it. All the kids I knew loved it. I had no problem with it, and I could watch it again. It's fine. 5 stars. From the cast, over the music, and the style of the magic in here to the story, I like this film a lot. 4 stars. This movie does very well with creativity on the way they use magic, and gave a great throwback from the original Fantasia short, and gave a great message to kids who would watch it to believe in themselves, to achieve the most unbelievable things possible. I agree the message is good. The message to kids is good. It's rare we see movies that are effective at delivering positive messages to kids. I think this does a very good job of it. I agree it's creative. The nesting doll concept with the different wizards trapped inside, I found that unique. I haven't seen that done anywhere else. I don't even think that was a thing in the Disney Fantasia. This is like a unique concept to me. It was at the time. I haven't seen anybody else do it either. I liked it, and I think I wanted to see more. I mean, for me to give this movie more than 3 stars, or to give it like say a 4-star rating, I would have to see a lot more on the nesting doll magic, how it works, bigger budget, more drama. But again, we would be taking it out of the realm of a kid's flick and into, PG-13 R-rated territory. I think this succeeds as 3 stars the way it is. And the concept was original. The nesting dolls with the spirits trapped, one being released after the other, the release of one affecting the other. I thought that was fantastic. 2 stars. Disney attempts to give a lighter Harry Potter-esque film and failing by ripping off certain films, plus even similar ones. I completely disagree. I found this more original than Harry Potter. Harry Potter to me is like, okay, not to turn this onto a bash on Harry Potter, but just as an aside, I feel that Harry Potter is ridiculous because it's one of those things where when the protagonists get into a tight spot, you just make up something on the fly and pop it down in there as canon to save them. I find that ridiculous. Overall, I consider what's done in this film to be more original than Harry Potter because Harry Potter, you can't compare it to anything because anytime it might become stale, it just pops another random thing in there to change it up. That's on the writer, and I don't like it. Um, Again, to me, on the second movie, I tuned out. I found the first 1 and 2 of Harry Potter movies to be great, but after that, I tuned out. I can't remember what happens. 2.5 stars. While it may have its moments where it truly shines, The Sorcerer's Apprentice is an overall forgettable and predictable affair that is at least worth watching only once. It wasn't that bad. I would say that you could watch it 2 or 3 times, no big deal. 1.5 stars. The Sorcerer's Apprentice is a half-baked movie. It rushes from plot point to plot point without letting anything soak in, really, and they seem to be making up rules as they go along. I disagree. I think that's more like Harry Potter. Jay Baruchel is entertaining enough, but Nicolas Cage just feels out of place. There are some fun visual effects, though. I think this movie would have benefited from a couple more drafts of the screenplay. I'll kind of agree with that. I think with a bigger budget, it would have been more refined. They could have made it pumped up the tension a little bit. But again, this is marketed to families where you can't cross this into PG-13 territory or it's not the same movie. This wasn't made for PG-13 audiences. 3.5 stars. I don't get all the hate for this movie. It's a fun watch if you're realistic about what it's supposed to be going into. It's a Disney film based on a Disney classic. The effects are great. The cast is great. The pace is good with a few clever parts. Overall, it's a light, fun time. The creation of the classic mop scene, the recreation of the classic mop scene was fun. I don't like Nick Cage at all, and I enjoyed him in this. That says a lot. Teresa Palmer is fantastic as an active love interest, supporting cast member. Overall, it's an enjoyable family fun movie. I mostly agree with this. Again, if you hate Nicolas Cage movies, this is his least offensive, in my opinion. 4 stars. I liked it because it was well done, clean, free from foul language and vulgarity. Too bad it didn't do better. I'd see more of these type of movies. Again, I think it's working against that. I think I've said before, if you had a bigger budget and you made this PG-13, it would have been more successful. But again, it wouldn't have been a family movie. They weren't trying to make a PG-13 film. 3 stars. Somewhat fun movie with a decent performance from Nick Cage and good special effects. I agree. 4 stars. A fresh movie played from an old classic tale. A movie that you need to relax your mind and let go to really enjoy. 1.5 stars. A very weak, sloppy movie with arbitrary mythology and physics. And never has there been a more miscast actor than Jay Baruchel in this film. Spent most of the film doing a bad Nick Cage impersonation of past time. I disagree. I thought the casting was fine. In fact, I thought they were well cast. I think every character was cast in the right role. So I totally disagree. 4 stars. I actually really enjoyed this movie. It was simple and fun. Sure, it was campy, but I expected that one coming in. I can't fault a movie for delivering exactly what it promised. I largely agree. It delivered what it promised at the beginning. It didn't derail into something else. It didn't ignore what it set up at the beginning. It solved the problem that it began at the beginning. Well executed is what I would say. 2 stars. Has a good premise and Nick Cage is enjoyable but falls flat. Disagree. 5 stars. This was a good movie and kids will probably like it the same as I do, but the cast is pretty good. 5 stars, a little too high. 5 stars. I like some fantasy and science fiction come together where both magic and science show us something amazing. It wasn't amazing and I wouldn't give it 5 stars. Let's not overtalk it. 5 stars. It may be not like the Mickey Mouse short back in 1940, but it's still a very entertaining film to watch. I agree, but not the 5 stars. 2 stars. Book was good. Movie is cheesy as hell. I don't think there was a book. But then again, who knows? There might be a young adult book based off the movie. Don't know enough about that. 4 star, 3.5 stars. Another movie says if you use the brain more than 10%, lots of things can be done. The movie is fun but lack a lot of things. Some spectacular animated scenes made it very cool. Yes and no. I'm not sure what they're referencing with the 10% of brain use. I hope they're not referencing Lucy because that's a different genre. 3.5 stars. Good, exciting Disney film. Loved the broom scene, a parody on Fantasia short with Mickey Mouse. 3 stars, not English. 3.5 stars, one of my favorite movies about magic. 3 stars, well acted, original and interesting story, but very predictable narrative. 3 stars, well acted, original and interesting story, but very predictable narrative. Yeah, a repeat and a very predictable repeat. The film relies heavily on visual effects, which are intriguing, but that isn't enough to fill the gap of the poor script that makes the film a bit dull and lacking thrills. 2.5 stars. I'll mostly agree on that. But it's not dull. Lacking thrills, maybe, but no, I disagree. It's not dull. Visual effects are necessary. You can't tell a story about wizards without visual effects. I don't know what you thought was going to happen. I mean, you thought that you were going to cast some spells and you were going to not have CGI. Yeah, that's not going to work. 3.5 stars, okay movie, but not a lot of Nicolas Cage. There should be more Cage than Burchill. I love the Dragon Ring. Great Jerry. Okay, a lot of misspelling there, but I get the point. 2.5 stars, fun movie, pretty good CGI and action. Dialogue leaves a lot to be desired, worth the watch. Grade 5.5 out of 10. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. 2.5 stars, okay. We're not too far off. 4 stars. The Sorcerer's Apprentice is very cliched, but it still manages to entertain with a great cast and amazing effects that boast a lot of fun. I'll mostly agree. 3 stars. While it is mildly entertaining, I feel this movie had a rather weak script, the very definition of a predictable plot, and just fails at feeling convincing. Instead, coming off as a rather overblown filmmaking. Not quite a bad movie, but you're not missing out on much by not seeing it. I kind of agree, but you're leaning more to the negative. No, I'd say it's better. 3 stars. Definitely not Nicolas Cage's best film, but the good cast and CGI does make it an enjoyable film, as well as how the characters interact with one another. I agree. I think it did a good job of portraying the character like from a small kid meeting, Nicolas Cage's wizard to being an older kid that was college age and again meeting Nicolas Cage's character. It did a good job with that of, bringing you from elementary school to college level. I thought it worked well. I thought it was cast fine to do that. No problem. 2 stars. Mix of thriller and fantasy. This is a story of wizards. Balthazar, an apprentice of Merlin, is given the mission. Okay, there's a synopsis. Yeah, the synopsis is fine. 2 stars. No, 3 stars. I wish they would give, instead of a synopsis, an actual review. 4 stars. I find this film to be very enjoyable. It isn't quality film, but it's one of those dopey magic action drama entertaining movies that are worth watching. Yeah, and this is a Nicolas Cage fan, but even without, being on either side of the Nicolas Cage divide, this movie is 3 stars. 4 stars, excellent casting and lots of brilliant special effects help make this a riveting little distraction. Almost 4 stars, but not there. 3 stars, it was okay, and I have watched it a few times, but gotta say, Mr. Cage wasn't at his best. Well, if he wasn't at his best, then why did you watch it a few times? No, I don't buy it. There's no, you can't say Nicolas Cage was at his best or worst. There is no best or worst Nicolas Cage. I mean, it's like a very subjective thing. Nicolas Cage, I would call a very subjective experience in itself. It's a matter of debate on what is good and bad about him. I think that's the way he likes it too. 4 stars, Disney magic, well done. I'll agree, Disney did what they set out to do. They did a good job, but 3 stars. 3.5 stars, not exactly the greatest story, but fun special effects and good acting, at least from Barokel, and one of my favorite little sequences with an entertaining display of Tesla coils. I'll mostly agree with that, and I'll call it here because I've made my point. The Sorcerer's Apprentice, I don't think it deserves 40% or 53%. I feel it's more like a 60%er, 55, 60%. And I feel like it's not overlooked. It's not a film that you could say everybody forgot about, but it's a film that people are judging it against Harry Potter. It's not the same genre as Harry Potter. It's completely different than Harry Potter. I find that almost like an insult. I really should do a video on Harry Potter because, Harry Potter is made for kids, but enough adults are reading Harry Potter books and watching the material and the movies that I feel like it almost makes me have to critique Harry Potter. So I think something like that is coming, and I'm going to make sure I highlight rotten reviews of it because, if it had stopped at movie 1 or 2, and I could say, oh, it's a kid's movie. Don't judge it as anything else. No, I've seen plenty of adults in the real world carrying around Harry Potter books and enjoying them on their lunch breaks. So no, I think Harry Potter's fair game. But again, I think it's a different genre than this. It's not fair to compare this to that. Let's see how this ages. I think that this should have had a sequel and it didn't. Anyway, it's too late, and I'm going to move on to other things, and I'm going to see you in the next Rotten Review.